Have you ever had your entire world pivot on a single, broken sentence spoken by a child? It happened to a man named Vincent Marchetti. And he was not a man who was easily moved. He was, in fact, the most feared man on the East Coast. But on a cool autumn afternoon, in the back garden of his Long Island estate, everything changed. Vincent hadn't meant to stop. He was just taking a shortcut through the garden, his mind 1,000 miles away, when he heard the sound, a tiny, trembling voice that seemed to cut through the very fabric of the air. He froze. A small girl, no older than 4, was huddled behind an old oak tree, clutching a ragged, one-eared stuffed rabbit. She was sobbing so hard her whole body shook, repeating the same desperate plea over and over. "Please don't take my mommy away. My mommy didn't do anything. I promise she didn't." Vincent stood motionless. The sound of her grief was a physical blow, and he felt something shift inside him, something he thought had died years ago. He found himself walking toward the tree. His handmade leather shoes crunched on the gravel, a sound that echoed in the stillness. The little girl saw him and flinched, pressing her back against the tree's rough bark, hugging the rabbit as if it were the only shield she had. Then, something even more extraordinary happened. Rex, Vincent's massive black Doberman who had never once wagged his tail for a stranger, walked quietly to the girl. He sat beside her, his great head resting gently on her small leg, as if he'd been guarding her his entire life. Vincent watched his dog choose, and then he did something he hadn't done in 13 years. He knelt in the fallen leaves, not caring about the thousands of dollars of Italian wool he was ruining, until his eyes were level with hers. His voice, usually as sharp as broken glass, came out as soft as he could make it. "Who made you cry?" he asked. And then, the story came out in fragments, the gasping sobs of a heartbroken child. It was about a cruel head housekeeper named Renata and a beautiful golden pocket watch that had been hidden in her mother's locker. The housekeeper was telling everyone that Mia's mother had broken it, that she was a thief, that she would be sent away before the sun went down. Vincent listened to the whole story without interrupting. He didn't narrow his eyes or ask a single question. He just listened. And when she was done, he held out his hand, palm open, patient. A long moment passed. Then, her small, tear-soaked fingers slipped trustingly into his. He lifted her up. She was as light as a whisper. She rested her head on his shoulder without a second thought, as if she'd known him forever. Rex walked close to his master's leg, a silent, powerful escort. The three of them, the Mafia boss, the little girl, and the loyal dog, walked into the mansion as the last light of the sun poured gold across the gravel path. Just before they reached the front steps, Mia tilted her head up, her small voice a whispered, "You smell like coffee," she said. The first thing she'd said all day that didn't sound like fear. Vincent didn't answer, but his hand, supporting her tiny back, tightened just a little. He was confirming to himself that this tiny creature was real. In that single moment, something that had been locked inside his chest for 13 years began to crack open along one thin, silver seam inside the grand foyer of the Marchetti estate. The world felt like a cathedral built for a family that had forgotten how to pray. White marble floors shone like glass, 6 crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling 22 feet high, and the afternoon light shattered into 1,000 pieces of gold. Standing alone in the center of that vast space was a young woman in a worn housekeeper's uniform. This was Clara Walsh, 29 years old. Her hands were red and raw from scrubbing, and they trembled at her sides. She had no idea why she had been summoned, only that she feared the worst. Before her stood Renata Cole, the head housekeeper, a woman who had held absolute power in this house for 40 years. The look on her face was one of cold triumph. Vincent entered without a sound and gently set Mia down. When Clara saw her daughter, and then saw who was holding her, she went utterly still. In the 8 months she had worked in this mansion, she had never been closer than 10 feet to the master of the house. But now he was standing right next to her. Vincent didn't look at her. Instead, he turned to his second-in-command, a man named Marcus Wolfe who had stood by him for a decade. He gave 4 orders in a calm, flat voice that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. Pull the security footage from the display gallery. The last 3 days. Close the front gate. No one leaves until I say so. Bring the head of security to the vault. Now. Marcus nodded and was gone in an instant. Renata Cole went pale, her carefully composed face crumbling as she watched her plans unravel. Mia reached up and gripped a fold of Vincent's trousers. Her big, watery eyes looked up at him. "Uncle Vincent," she said. "You believe my mommy, don't you?" Vincent looked down, and for the first time, the coldest eyes on the East Coast softened by just a single degree. His voice fell across the great hall, a proclamation carved into stone. "I believe children who tell the truth." Minutes later, in the cold, concrete security vault, Vincent watched a crystal-clear video on a monitor. It showed Renata Cole taking the priceless pocket watch from its display case, carrying it down a service staircase, and placing it inside Clara's locker. The footage was the evidence he needed. He also had a financial record showing that Renata had been siphoning money from the household accounts for years, hiding it through fake suppliers. The woman was a spider, and her web had just collapsed. But Vincent was a patient hunter. He didn't want just the spider, he wanted the entire nest. He told Marcus, "Don't let her go yet. Give her another day. Whoever is helping her inside this house will show themselves." He knew that terrified accomplices always make mistakes. The next morning, in a private drawing room, Vincent offered the truth to Clara. "In this house, a child who tells the truth deserves a reward." He gave her a new position as the head housekeeper and tripled her salary. Mia was given a beautiful nursery overlooking the rose garden. When Clara saw the room, she wept. She wept because this kind of peace had never been hers before. That first night, Mia and Vincent were in the library. She had pulled a dusty old book from the shelf, The Velveteen Rabbit, and was reading it aloud, though she couldn't actually read. She had memorized every word from her mother's bedtime stories. Vincent stood in the doorway, listening to her small, serious voice. "Real isn't how you are made," she said. "It's a thing that happens to you." When she finished, she waved her hand. "Uncle Vincent, come sit. I'll read to you." No one had dared call Don Vincent Marchetti by his first name in 15 years. Clara came running, breathless. "Sweetheart, no? You must call him Mr. Marchetti." But Vincent cut her off gently, not looking away from the child. "Vincent is fine," he said. "She decides." From that day on, they formed a new tradition. Every Saturday at 3 o'clock, Mia would read to him in the library. He would sit in the armchair opposite her, a newspaper unopened on his lap. Rex would lay stretched across her feet, snoring softly. One evening, she pulled him into the small kitchen to eat spaghetti her mother had cooked. He sat beside her, not at the head of the table, and listened as she told him how Rex had just saved her from a butterfly the size of an automobile. Vincent laughed. It was a dry, rough sound, almost as if he had forgotten how to make it. Clara, standing at the stove, wiped a tear from her cheek before she turned around. She was watching a monster become a man, one small step at a time. That one Saturday in early November, Vincent took Mia to the heated indoor pool. She took one look at the water and burst into tears, terrified it might swallow her mother. But Vincent, wearing simple navy swim shorts, stepped into the water and extended his hand to her. "Come," he said, "nothing here will hurt you." He taught her to blow bubbles, to float on her back on his open palms, and when she tried her first stroke, she wrapped both arms around his neck in a chokehold of pure faith, her feet kicking in every direction at once. 30 minutes later, her laughter was ringing through the whole garden, a clear, bright sound. Clara sat at the edge of the pool, barefoot, watching them. She didn't dare name the feeling yet, but it looked a lot like hope. That evening, after her bath, Vincent told Mia the story of Rex, how he had found him as a puppy, scarred and terrified in an illegal dog-fighting ring. How it took 2 years of quiet patience before the dog would let anyone touch his stomach. Mia listened thoughtfully, and then frowned in the serious way small children do. "So," she said, "you're like Rex. You've been hit many times, too, haven't you?" Vincent didn't answer. He couldn't. Just outside the door, Clara heard the question and slipped away, her heart aching in a way she didn't yet understand. But in the shadows, trouble was brewing. A woman named Vivian Ross, Vincent's fiancée, saw Mia and Clara as a threat. She had been engaged to Vincent for 5 years through a business arrangement between their families, a contract drawn up after a bloody territorial war. Vivian was beautiful, ambitious, and cold. She had tolerated Vincent's indifference, but she would not tolerate a little girl who was melting his heart. She conspired to destroy them. Martha, a trusted servant who had been a spy for the previous housekeeper, became Vivian's eyes and ears inside the mansion. She reported everything. Vincent teaching Mia to swim, Vincent laughing at a child's joke, Vincent sitting in the small kitchen, not at the head of the table. Vivian's plan was venomous. She would first destroy Clara. She arrived at the estate every day, acting as the future lady of the house. She made Clara scrub the massive marble floor on her hands and knees for 3 hours. She shattered an expensive bottle of perfume and blamed it on Clara. She humiliated her in front of the other staff. But it was her cruelty to Mia that crossed a line that when Mia tried to protect her mother, Rex stepped between the little girl and Vivian, his black eyes fixed on the woman, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Vivian had to retreat. Then Vivian struck a deeper blow. She had Martha arrange for Clara's apartment lease to be terminated. Her few belongings would be sold. She was cutting off the only escape route Clara had. One night, during a thunderstorm, Mia woke up and went looking for her mother. She found her alone in the kitchen, weeping silently, a termination notice on the table. Mia walked over, placed her one-eyed rabbit on her mother's lap, and said, "Mommy, Mr. Whiskers will protect you. So will I? Please don't cry." Clara pulled her daughter into her arms. Vincent appeared in the doorway, 2 aspirin forgotten in his hand. He had been about to get a glass of water, but he saw the scene and his heart twisted. He remembered being 12 years old, finding his own mother weeping in the kitchen. He had walked away. 3 weeks later, she was dead. He would not make the same mistake twice. He walked into the kitchen and sat across from Clara. "You don't have to cry alone anymore," he said quietly to Mia, climbed into his lap, and pressed Mr. Whiskers into his hands. "Uncle Vincent, you hold him tonight. He'll protect you too." Vincent took the one-eyed rabbit. He looked at the termination notice and said, "I'll handle it. Your home is here." He carried Mia back to her bed and clumsily tucked her in. As he left, he stopped at Clara's door. "If you ever need to talk at night," he said, "the library door is never locked. Any hour." He walked away into the darkness. Clara watched him go, a single tear falling down her cheek. Vivian's plan escalated. She would not just destroy Clara. She would kill the love Vincent had for the little girl. She devised a scheme to poison herself at the grand engagement gala, then frame Clara for the crime. She would swallow a drug that would make her sick, but not kill her. She had it all planned. She would plant a forged diary in Mia's room, a vial of the drug in Clara's drawer, and a fingerprint on the evidence. The entire household would see Clara as a jealous killer. But Vivian had a fatal flaw. Marcus, Vincent's trusted right-hand man, was not loyal. He had been selling secrets to a rival family for years. He wanted Vincent and Vivian's families to go to war so he could rise in the chaos. He saw Vivian's scheme and saw a golden opportunity. He broke into her room, opened her leather case, and swapped her sedative for a vial of a lethal poison the night of the gala. The Marchetti mansion was a glittering fortress of power. 80 guests, the most powerful crime families on the East Coast, were in attendance. Vivian moved through the room, a predator in an arterial red dress, a smile on her face. On her finger was a hollow ring she could use to empty the vial into her drink. At the appointed time, she asked Clara for a glass of orange juice. She poured the liquid from her ring into the glass. The poison was fast. In seconds, her hand flew to her throat. The glass shattered. She collapsed. And then she was still. Chaos erupted. Vivian's father, Don Salvatore Ross, was beside himself with grief and rage. He accused Clara of murder. Evidence was found in Clara's room and in Mia's velvet rabbit. The room was a storm of accusations. Vincent stood in the middle of it, his heart ice cold. He looked at Mia, her small hand gripping his trouser leg, her eyes round and uncomprehending. He looked at Clara, who was standing by the drink station, her face the color of chalk. He didn't have a choice. To stop a war, he had to let them take her. "Clara will go with you," he said to Don Salvatore. "But she goes as a witness under review, not a criminal. I have 72 hours for an investigation. If I find proof of her guilt, you will have her. But if I do not, she returns here unharmed." Don Salvatore agreed. Clara was led away by 2 of his men. Mia saw her mother being taken. She let go of Vincent's leg and ran across the marble floor. "Mommy! Mommy!" Clara turned back and dropped to her knees. "Mommy will come back. I promise. Stay with Uncle Vincent." She kissed her daughter, then stood and walked away without looking back. Mia didn't scream. She just stood in the middle of the grand hall, one-eyed rabbit dangling from her fist. It wasn't until the doors of the estate closed behind her mother that she broke into a ragged sob. Vincent walked over and picked her up. She buried her face in his neck and said hoarsely, "Uncle Vincent, you bring Mommy home. You promised me like I promised you at the pool." Vincent promised nothing, because for the first time in 13 years, he was not sure he could keep his word. The next morning, the estate was a house of mourning and fear. Mia didn't understand where her mother had gone. She woke in her ivory bed and ran down the hallway, looking for her. She found only Vincent, sitting in the library, his face gray with exhaustion and worry. "Where is Mommy?" she asked. "Mommy is somewhere else," he said. "I am finding a way to bring her back." She burrowed into his chest. "Uncle Vincent, you believe my mommy, don't you?" "Of course I do, Mia," he said. "But this time, it's harder. There are many others who don't believe." She thought about it seriously, like a little adult. "Like last time, the evidence said Mommy took the watch. But you believed me. Then you found the truth." She looked at him with complete faith. "So this time, you believe me too. And you will find the truth." Vincent held her tighter. He didn't have the heart to tell her that this time. There was no camera behind a painting, no clear ledger of shell companies, only a corpse and evidence that pointed at her mother. But he promised anyway. "I will find the truth, Mia. I promise." Vincent had to act fast. His investigation started with his Aunt Isabella, a sharp old woman who had come down from Vermont. "The evidence is too perfect, Vincent," she said. "It's suspicious. And the way Vivian fell, it was too fast. The poison was swapped. Someone in your inner circle is a snake." Vincent's mind raced. He remembered a small detail, his loyal man, Marcus. He was supposed to be investigating Martha, but Vincent had a shadow of a doubt. He needed to find the truth. He called in a favor. He brought in Nico Bellini, a man he hadn't spoken to in 3 years, a man who had been quietly ousted by Marcus. Nico was his only ace in the hole, a man he could trust completely. But while Vincent was making his plans, Marcus was making his. The key to everything was Mia. Vincent didn't question her as a suspect. He questioned her to understand. He led her to the library, sat her on his lap by the window, and asked her about the gala. "Tell me everything you remember, sweetheart," he said, his voice as calm and gentle as he could make it. Mia thought carefully, counting on her fingers. "I wore a white lace dress with a blue ribbon. Mommy tied it. You wore a black bow tie. Aunt Vivian wore a red dress. I don't like red dresses. I like my blue one better. Mommy stood at the drink table." "What else?" Vincent asked. Mia furrowed her brow. "Uncle Marcus. He was wearing a gray suit. He was going up and down a lot." Vincent froze, but he kept his voice steady. "What do you mean, going up and down?" Mia nodded. "I saw him. In the morning, while Mommy was getting my clothes ready, I ran into the hallway looking for Mr. Whiskers. I saw Uncle Marcus come out of Aunt Vivian's room." Vincent felt the ground fall away from him. "Are you sure it was Aunt Vivian's room?" "Yes. The blue parlor on the 2nd floor. She rests there whenever she comes early." "And Uncle Marcus?" "He had a bottle in his hand. A small purple one, like lavender. A purple bottle. Exactly the kind Vivian had used. And Marcus had had it in his hand hours before the gala." Vincent leaned down to Mia. "You did wonderfully. I am proud of you. But don't tell anyone about this. Not even Aunt Isabella. It's our secret." Mia nodded very seriously. "Yes, our secret." Vincent held her for a moment, then kissed the top of her head. He left her with a picture book and went straight down to the garage. He drove out of the estate without telling a soul that Vincent met Nico at a safe house in Brooklyn. "For the next 72 hours, you are the only person I trust," he said. "I need 3 investigations. First, Marcus's financial transactions for the past 3 years. Second, his contacts with the Colombo family. Third, the doctor who prescribed Vivian's medicine. I need to know what she took and compare it to the poison in her blood." Nico began to work. He had been sidelined by Marcus for 3 years, but he had never truly left. He had been building his own private network of sources, just waiting for a moment like this. While Nico worked, Vincent had to protect Mia. Marcus was a snake. He knew about the purple bottle. He had to act. He ordered his men to guard the house, to watch everything. But it was too late. The next morning, Marcus made his move. He approached Mia in the back garden, a smile on his face. "Uncle Marcus has news for you," he said. "I know where your mommy is. She's at the Russo house. But Uncle Vincent won't let you visit her. He's afraid it's dangerous. I can take you to see her for 1 hour, then bring you back. Do you want to see your mommy? A 4-year-old's logic is simple. Mia wanted her mommy more than anything. She hesitated, but when Marcus said it was a secret, she agreed. Thinking of the secret she had just shared with Uncle Vincent, Marcus took her hand and led her to a waiting car. The car left the estate at 10:22 a.m. The only trace left behind was the small silver bracelet Elena had given Mia, which caught on the gate latch and fell into the grass. It was the only clue anyone found when Aunt Isabella noticed Mia was missing. She found the bracelet and immediately called Vincent. His heart turned to ice. Mia is gone, she said to Vincent. Didn't ask questions. He didn't panic. He just moved. He called Nico. Marcus has taken Mia. Find him. Nico traced the location through Marcus's contact in the Colombo family. Marcus had taken Mia to a warehouse on the border of Russo territory. The plan was to use her as a pawn to start a war, then kill her and blame it on the Russos. He would frame Vincent for it, causing a war that would destroy both families. Leaving the Colombos to take over inside the warehouse, Mia was locked in a room. She heard Marcus talking to another man through a crack in the wall. The girl can't see the sun rise, Marcus said. We'll leave her body on Russo ground. The old man will think Vincent's men did it. The war will start perfectly. Mia was terrified, but she didn't cry. She held Mr. Whiskers and whispered, Uncle Vincent will come. He promised. Vincent mobilized his men. He led a team of 20 to the warehouse. Nico came through the back. Vincent breached the front door. A short firefight took place, and Marcus was cornered. He grabbed Mia, held a gun to her head, and backed into the main hall. One move, and she's dead. Marcus snarled. Vincent didn't lower his weapon. His voice was stone. You were my right hand for 10 years. You sat at my table. You ate my bread. And now you're going to die like a dog over a child. Marcus laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. You've known this brat for 4 months. For months, Vincent. And you're throwing away everything we built for her. Vincent looked at Mia. She looked back at him, her eyes wide and wet, but unblinking. And then she whispered, small but clear, Uncle Vincent, I am not afraid. Those 3 words broke Marcus's focus for a split second. Nico appeared from the roof and shot him in the shoulder. The gun dropped. Marcus went down. Vincent moved, kicking the weapon away, and lifted Mia into his arms. She didn't cry. She just wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, I knew you would come. I told Mr. Whiskers. He held her for nearly a minute before he could speak. You are the bravest child I have ever met, he said. He looked at the men he had just defeated. Marcus was on the floor, cuffed and bleeding. You'll regret this, Marcus spat. When she's older and learns the truth, that her father was never you, you'll regret letting a housekeeper's child into your heart. Vincent didn't answer. He only looked at Nico. Take him. Alive. The council will want to hear every word. Vincent carried Mia out of the warehouse. He drove her back home. When they arrived at the estate, Elena was already there. Don Salvatore had released her, having seen the truth in the evidence Nico had sent him. She ran to the car. Mia flew into her mother's arms. Elena knelt on the paving stones, sobbing, unable to speak. Aunt Isabella wept in silence. Rex ran circles around them, tail wagging for the first time in 3 days. Vincent stood several meters away, watching them. He didn't need to come closer. 3 weeks passed. Marcus was judged by the council, stripped of everything, and handed to the FBI. The truth of Vivian's death was made public. She had been wrong to plan against Clara, but she did not deserve to die. The funeral was held, and Vincent stood beside Don Salvatore for 40 minutes, a sign of respect that mended the broken bond between their families. That Clara stayed at the estate, but not as a housekeeper. She was something more, something that had no name yet. And Mia had no nightmares. One Sunday afternoon, Mia took Vincent's hand and led him into the garden. She stopped at the exact bush where they had first met. From her pocket, she drew a crayon picture. 3 figures holding hands, a tall dark-haired man, a brown-haired woman, and a small yellow girl in the middle. Above them, in trembling capital letters, were the words, My family. She held it up. Uncle Vincent, she said. Can I call you Papa? Vincent stood still among the autumn leaves. For months ago, at this same bush, he had asked her who made her cry. Now he knelt again. He took her small hands in his, and the coldest eyes on the East Coast were no longer hard. They were wet. If that is what you want, he said slowly, his voice cracking, then yes, my little one. Mia broke into a cry of pure joy and threw both arms around his neck. Vincent lifted his eyes to Clara, who was standing just a few feet away, her hands pressed to her chest, tears streaming silently down her face. They both understood everything. Aunt Isabella set a tray of tea on the stone table. The four of them, with Rex lying under the old oak, sat together in the last golden light of autumn. That sometimes the greatest story of a person's life begins with the smallest sound of tears. It begins with a child the world has not yet learned to name. It begins with courage, the kind that dares to speak the truth while your voice still shakes. And it begins with love, the kind that chooses to believe even when all the evidence says otherwise. Has there ever been a Mia in your life, a pair of small eyes that pulled you out of a darker version of yourself? Please share your story below. Someone reading tonight might just need the very words you write. If this story moved you, please press like, share it with someone you love, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. We wish you and your family strong health, joyful days, and peace in every evening ahead. Thank you for staying until the very end. Goodbye.